All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our digital version of our Elevate Career Series, Career Hacks Online. We've got a great set of panelists with us today to help us better understand ways that they personally use, cultivate, and leverage their networks. I know that for many, the term networking can cause some cringes, some thoughts of awkward forced conversations, that awkward handshake when you show up somewhere and you don't know what you're doing, or the standard collection of business cards and following up and making a connection on LinkedIn. So even though those are the standards, we're hoping to help change some of your perspective on that today and inevitably help you accomplish growing your network and using it to the best advantage you can. Our hope today is to help you gain a better understanding of how these panelists have all established, built, and established their and utilized their networks, both digitally and in person, to land where they are. They're all in successful positions. I think you can see that from their bios that you might have read at this point, and how they every day cultivate those networks and those relationships to help get them into successful positions. For those joining us for another Career Hacks presentation today, welcome back. And for those new to the party, we're glad that you're here to join us today. My name is Josh Proulx. I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement here at the UConn Foundation. I'm a proud alum and an avid networker myself. In the background that you all can't see today are my two esteemed colleagues who are helping to produce this today and helped us put this together. Huge thanks to Alyssa Kelly, our Director of Alumni Relations for the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, as well as the Director of Alumni Relations for the School of Engineering, Kate Krause. Huge help in putting this together, and we can't do this without them, obviously making sure that everything's being facilitated. So huge thanks to them. Starting in alpha order, I'm going to throw it to my new pick-on person immediately as we've kind of gone through these things. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jacquelynn Garofano. Jackie, welcome. You're the lucky one who gets picked on first today, as I said. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself today, your thoughts on networking, and if this all comes naturally to you?
So hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from. I am here based in Connecticut. I am a Connecticut native, so I went to UConn for grad school, got a PhD in material science and engineering. So as an engineer and as a scientist, people question why I'm so savvy with social networking. I love social media, love it, especially LinkedIn, because as a professional, wanting to grow your own brand and establish yourself as a professional in whatever sector or field that you're in, I feel it's critically important. So for me, I am very proud of the presence that I have on social media and the authenticity that I bring, and we'll talk about that later. And also the different voices on each platform. So I'm thrilled to be amidst my other rockstar panelists here today because I get to learn some of the ins and outs of other platforms like Facebook, LinkedIn, and just career consulting. So I started my career as an engineer at United Technologies at the Research Center. And I was doing that gig for 7 years. And now I'm in talent acquisition for Raytheon Technologies. I'm a program manager of our engineering leadership development program. So I do nothing technical. I'm a PhD in HR, and I absolutely love my job. And I love social media and social networking. So I'm thrilled to be here today.
Thanks very much for joining us, Jackie, and thanks for that. Next on our panel, I'm going to turn it over to Khalil Lane. Khalil, thanks so much for joining us. Coming to us today from Facebook, one of the ultimate networking tools. Same question to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, basically your thoughts on networking, and if this comes easy for you.
Sure. So good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Khalil. I want to say thank you for attending and for all of the fellow panelists for joining today. And I would be remiss not to say go Huskies. I love my UConn family. So as Josh kind of alluded to, I work at Facebook and Instagram, WhatsApp. I'm kind of the host of Facebook products. I cover content policy development. So we write policies that regulate how commercial content can be shared on the platform, how organic content, so content that you or I might post to the platform, is quote unquote regulated and shared with the community. So it's a really unique position to be in. I feel very privileged to have this opportunity to kind of be on the first frontier of internet content policy drafting, and it's been a whirlwind, but a lot of fun. And for kind of my thoughts on networking, I think it's all what you put into it, and I think above all else, you got to have fun with the process. it hasn't necessarily come natural to me in my personal life. It's something that I had to work towards and kind of figure out my style that fit my comfort level. And I think that really started with figuring out, what values do I bring to the table? What skills and strengths do I have? And once I had those in my back pocket, I was able to go out with confidence and shake hands, ask for cards, and really kind of wear my kind of skills on my shoulder, so folks knew exactly what I was about. They knew I was curious, they knew I was positive, and they knew that I had energy. And I think that those are some high level things that I wanted to get across to folks when I would have maybe 2 or 3 minutes with someone that might not have 2 or 3 minutes to spare. So above all else, you got to have fun with it. Get to know, your strengths, your skill sets, and then, don't be afraid to pound the pavement and get out there and meet people, because it gets easier with time. If you're an extrovert, introvert like me, you're gonna find that it's gonna be a little tough at the outset, but it is all worth it in the end, and we'll get into that later. But really looking forward to this conversation today, and thanks again for joining.
Thanks, Khalil. Next on the list, my good friend Morgan O'Brien, our resident career management expert. He's no stranger to our career hacks or our webinar platforms. And I think this marks your 3rd webinar at this point and your 4th event that you've done with us tied to careers. If we count that event we did in Dallas back in January. Morgan, welcome to the party as well. Great to have you back. I know you have a great insight into all of this. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And obviously, you work in the career world, so I'm guessing networking comes easy, but you tell us.
Thank you, Josh, for the introduction. It's great to be here. And networking is really essential in what I do, and it's essential for career success, I think, for everyone, and especially to be an effective leader. Graduated from UConn when we had 0 national championships. We had one NIT when I graduated, so a lot of basketball has been played since then. I've spent my career as a human resources consultant. Now I'm in management consulting. I work for a small firm called Brainerd Strategy. We help organizations make good decisions and move forward in a positive way. So we help them figure things out that they can't figure out on their own. Networking comes naturally for me now. However, I've learned some lessons along the way in how to do it effectively and how to leverage that network. And if you do it in a meaningful way, you can reach out to people you haven't spoken to for 10 or 15 years, and they are more than willing to help you. And we're going to talk about some of the ways to position yourself for success today. So I'm delighted to be here. It's always great to talk to members of the UConn family.
Thanks, Morgan. And last but certainly not least, Paul Petrone. Paul is a fellow person with the last name of P. I'm used to starting close to last, if not last. You work for the largest professional social media network out there in the world. I'm sure you have some thoughts to add to this discussion. Same question to you, my friend. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your thoughts on the networking.
Sure, great. And thanks everybody for joining today. It's great to talk to fellow UConn alumni and students I've heard too, which is awesome. I graduated UConn in 2006, the Emeka Okafor Ben Gordon years, which were good years. And since then, I paid my way through college, and even the few years after college, I worked construction. So I'm probably the last person you would think that would be a networking expert. And I graduated with a journalism degree, and for a while there was construction worker at day, reporter at night. And over the years, I became full-time journalist, and then eventually I got a job in Mystic, Connecticut in a small startup where we marketed on LinkedIn. I was actually at that time pretty unfamiliar with LinkedIn. And I managed to build up a network to the point that actually LinkedIn hired me because I'd become grown a pretty big brand within LinkedIn, and then since moved to San Francisco to work for LinkedIn. So I would say I'm very much an accidental networker. It wasn't something I sought out to do, but now I've seen the benefits of it, and now I've learned a lot more. And I think everybody in this panel, almost every single job I've gotten has been really through my network, whether it be in person or virtual or combination. So very excited to share about what I've learned in the 12 years or 14 years now since I graduated UConn.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Paul. And before we jump into today's discussion, to better help us be a little bit more thoughtful in our responses today, We're going to launch a poll onto your screen now for you to participate in. This is going to be one of a few that we're going to put together here today for you to participate in. But if you can jump into the poll today and let us know which descriptor best describes where you are currently in your career, that'll be helpful for us and our panelists as we formulate our answers to you today. And we'll give it a couple minutes here just to allow you some participation. Got some good numbers popping up. And another 30 seconds to jump in there and select. Around 60% participated, so feel free to jump in and let us know where you are in your career. Okay. All right, we can end that and then we'll share the results here for everybody. So those that participated, 2% are listing as a current student. We have 33% listed as early career, 0 to 8 years out from their undergraduate degree specifically. 22% 8 to 15 years out, so in that early mid to career. Mid-career folks, 15 to 25 years out. 10% late career, 25 to 35. We're looking at 27%, and 6% are looking for what next, or that second act that comes when you're ready to step away from the everyday grind and chaos. So, all right, great, perfect. Hopefully that helps us get a little bit more insight. So as we kind of get started today, you've all hit on some great pieces in respect to networking and our opening thoughts here. But first thing I think that is important for us to kind of understand is, let's talk about the definition, right? I mean, the network versus your digital network, is there a difference? What should we know? Paul, I'm going to throw this to you to kind of get us started.
Sure. So I don't think there should be a big difference between your virtual network and your in-person network. I think your virtual network can obviously be a lot larger, and it's a great way in the door. I mean, obviously, just using LinkedIn, one thing you can do is if you want to work for a company, you can see just one small example. You can see everybody who worked UConn at that company. You can reach out to those people and ask for an introduction. I think it's really important to build virtual. Obviously, working for a social media company, I'm a big believer, but I also think there's a place to take that conversation in person too. A little more difficult during COVID times, but on the phone, Zoom, and then when this all ends, in person, really helps strengthen that relationship. So I'm a big believer in either starting or continuing the relationship virtually, but also making the time for that in-person time as well.
Awesome, great. Any of our other panelists have additional thoughts on that one?
So, hi, this is Jackie. I might have said this in my intro, I'm a social media troll, right? So as soon as I know that I have a meeting with someone, or for example, with this panel, I didn't know Paul, Khalil, or Morgan before this. I immediately jumped on LinkedIn and find who they are, what they're about, and drop them a connection and send a message. Because for me, I want to know who these people are, but also I want them to know who I am before showing up for a meeting or showing up for an introduction. So I think it's a best practice to kind of get in that mindset. And I'll leave it at that.
Anybody else?
Sure, I can hop in if that, you know, and I would agree on what Paul had said, actually, around there not really being a hard and fast difference between your digital network and your real world network. I have to admit, obviously, that, you know, the benefits that a digital network provides are kind of expansive in that, you know, it's a 24/7 network that allows you to exchange ideas, allows you to meet folks from all walks of life, especially during this global pandemic that we're experiencing. So the benefits are in many ways limitless. With that said, I think from a digital standpoint, it really requires you to take some time to think about what you're posting, to think about what your bio says on LinkedIn, and those opportunities to summarize your values and your interests and things like that. I mean, you should take some time to curate that stuff, and it really matters, because, you know, as Jacquelynn was just talking about, folks will often go to your page and they should be able to get a snapshot of what you're about in doing so. And that'll help kind of smooth over or even expedite conversations and discussions around potential employment opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. So TLDR, I don't see much of a difference, but I do think from a digital networking standpoint, it's wholly beneficial for you to spend some time to actually, figure out what matters most to you and what you want to get out of a career, and what are your values that you want to impart to whoever visits your page or likes whatever you're posting online. So hopefully that's helpful.
Thanks, Khalil. And, we talked about this a little bit in our preliminary work to get this panel set and our discussion. So I'll ask the question so that folks can kind of hear the response. Jackie, I'll throw this to you. We talked about it. You mentioned going in and doing that stalking on the back end. Now, clearly, you're of the person that, because there's various settings within LinkedIn, we know that you can set where people can be visible and see other people when they're doing the stalking. So I'm guessing you're an open stalker and you're okay with people seeing about their profile.
Yeah, and I turn that setting off on my own LinkedIn, but I oftentimes forget that people will know when I'm trolling them. So I've been called out on that a couple times from, for example, I was working for a manager at UTC and he was not LinkedIn savvy. So I would go in and I would create copy for his LinkedIn posts. And it's something that comes naturally to me now. You want a good graphic, a good photo, something that's meaningful, a bit punchy, like drawing people in. I just did a post on my LinkedIn about being a STEMinist, and that's something that I'm fostering and cultivating this as my brand for various reasons. Connect with me on LinkedIn, please. I want to grow my numbers. But yeah, it's true. So I go in there. I'm a self-proclaimed cyber stalker. But it serves me well because people in my company and United Technologies and now Raytheon Technologies is a very, very large company. But I have senior leaders that come to me and they're like, well, you know everyone, right? It's because of my network from UConn. It's because of my community leadership. It's because of all of these things and different facets of my life that I'm proud of. I only have 2,600 people that I'm connected to on LinkedIn. I want to get that number up. But certainly those meaningful connections, that is really what brings me joy in life, because I can make connections for other people. It's not self-serving. It's for the betterment of building other people's communities and networks up.
I wanted to add, Josh, that one of the keys to digital networking is your ability to share articles and like other people's articles and tag people in posts. And that's an incredibly powerful thing, because you not only want to have as many connections as possible, you want people to know you as well. So I try to make it, a ritual that I want to post 1 or 2 articles a week and comment and tag people that have a lot of connections when I do so, because that way my profile gets out and is seen by so many more people.
Good advice. Now, another question tied to this: when you're building your network on LinkedIn, do you recommend at this point LinkedIn gives you the ability to enter in a message to the person you're reaching out to? If it's a person you don't necessarily know, do you recommend putting something in there? Do you not? Do you accept people if they don't include that?
Well, personally, I don't discriminate. I've been in business development most of my career, so my mindset has always been no connection is a bad connection unless they obviously look nefarious or could potentially, damage my image for some reason. So I am very much open to connecting with many people. There are people I know that are very selective and play it close to the vest. And, there are certainly perfectly good reasons for that as well. But for me, there's no connection that's a bad connection, because that allows me to see more profiles. The more connections I have, the more third connection profiles I can see.
I guess a follow-up question to that is do you know everybody? Do you maintain the relationships? Do you know them all? Have you met them all? Or is this an ability just to grow a network, to your point, to grow your ability to do research and profile scouting?
Yeah,
I certainly don't know that many people. I mentioned 2,600 on LinkedIn, right? So when Morgan says your second and third connections, that's tied to an organization, a university, you know, some sort of piece of your life that there's this 6 degrees of separation, right? And so to the point of, I want to have meaningful connections, but I also know that, as Morgan alluded to, it helps your own personal visibility as a professional, being, for example, on LinkedIn. So people can see you and get to know you, who you are, what you stand for, what you're interested in. And then as, you know, life happens, career changes happen, you can go back to those connections, even though it might have just been a, hey, I'm going to connect with you without a message. Typically, I don't send a message, because if I do that, someone that is not on LinkedIn often enough will say, oh, I got this message from you 3 months ago. And it's like, yeah, get on LinkedIn. Like, I'm currently on social media right now. I'm tweeting and being on LinkedIn and connecting with people that are reaching out. And so it's just a part of my ethos, I think. But search for those meaningful connections, because it will help you develop and cultivate those relationships, whether in a completely virtual setting or when we get back to normal life and you're able to get back to, you know, wherever the circles are in your life where you can have those face-to-face engagements.
Awesome. All right, well, let's move on a little bit here. Paul, I'm going to throw this to you for this to get us started here on this next one, but I'm sure you'd be surprised that people are here. We're talking about LinkedIn. I'm sure you'd be surprised that people signed up just to hear from the LinkedIn guy, but here we are today. I'm pretty sure you're not surprised by that. Can you talk to us about LinkedIn from the inside? Do you use LinkedIn the same way that the rest of us do? And here's my own personal question. I'm curious if you click the I'm searching button and you're open to recruiters, there's a little alarm bell goes off down at LinkedIn headquarters in San Francisco and somebody calls you and says,
so, all right, let me answer that second question first. I do have the I'm searching button on. I don't know if I should admit that on the publicly, but I mean, that's really up to you. I keep it on. I'm not interested in leaving LinkedIn, but I'm just interested in what's going to come my way via the in-mails and what recruiters are. So if you turn that off, so very specific to that question, if you turn off the I'm searching off, you won't show up in any recruiter searches through LinkedIn Recruiter. So if you want to, again, even if you're not looking, I personally recommend keeping it on, because you never know what's going to come through there, and you might get interesting in-mails or whatever, and opportunities that might strike your interest. So I personally would keep it on, but if you're really committed to your company and super loyal and see no reason, then turn it off. Absolutely. Just to the other point, some tips. Morgan was talking a little bit about messaging and what's the best practices for messaging. I used to work for LinkedIn Talent Solutions, part of the business, which is about a big part of that is recruiters reaching out to potential candidates and looking to get them interested in jobs. And so they care a lot about messaging, and we did a lot of studies around messaging to help them. And unsurprisingly, the highest messaging, the highest ROI is when you go from a cold lead to a warm lead, which I think gets to this whole point we're making is if you reach out to somebody who also went to UConn and you bring that up in the email, that has like a twice the chance of being replied to than if somebody who's not from UConn. Or if you have a common connection, or you both work for the same company, et cetera, et cetera. So this is, again, reemphasizes the importance of why it's so important to build your network. Now, let's say you want to reach out to somebody on LinkedIn who you have no connection with whatsoever, totally cold. Then the best way to do that, I'm going to steal a little bit of Jacquelynn's philosophy, is to be, quite frankly, a little bit of a LinkedIn stalker and see, hey, what is that person interested in? What have they been sharing? What have they been talking about? And then tie it to that. So then it feels relevant to them. If you go in and no matter what you're offering or what you're pitching or anything, if you go in with a totally cold open and no connection to them whatsoever and no tie, the probability of them is of responding to that message is very low. So that's just my one big tip on how to reach out and how to get intros. If you're looking for a job at a specific company, see who works at LinkedIn there, see who your common connections are, or if you have none of those, at least try to follow some people who work at that company and follow their post, and then respond off of that and try to make your post message really relevant instead of just completely cold.
Now I realize, sorry,
if I can just, sorry.
I overlooked something in this process, and I want to make sure that we throw it out there. We're talking about LinkedIn right now and talking about utilizing it to start forming a network that you can build on a digital footprint. One thing that we'd like to do is we'd like to throw out a quick poll again, just to kind of understand while we're continuing this conversation about how many connections you had. You heard Jacquelynn talk about 2,600. I'm probably around 1,500. Morgan, I think I remember seeing yours was in that 1,500 mark or so. So if you can, as one of our colleagues throws this up on the screen, if you want to go ahead and throw that out there. There's no right or wrong answer here, but we just want to have a better understanding kind of how we can help you in that process as well. Jacquelynn, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on you there.
That's okay. I was monitoring the Q&A and there was a question about how building one's network relates to students. And for me, I work with entry-level engineers coming into our huge corporation from graduating with bachelor's degrees, and they have maybe 200 connections at best. So as a student, my suggestion to you would be is start by following your university, the internship, fellowship, you know, all of the other extracurriculars that you have. You don't necessarily have to create your own content. You can engage with other content that you are connected with. And then certainly as you're going out and looking for job prospects, reach out to people in sectors of business that you would like to see yourself, because anyone wants to tell you about what they do for a living. And I'm sure that more people than not would be very much open to connecting with you and saying, I know this person, right? Because as you've heard before, opportunities that come your way are because of the network that you're cultivating, because of the relationships that you are building, or because friends, colleagues, neighbors, family, mentors, they are there to build that connection for you.
And Jacquelynn, I just want to build on that. Right now, my current job at LinkedIn, I actually focus on higher education and helping students build out their LinkedIn profile. So I do a lot of work on this, and there's a few things you can do as a student. So first off, most students do have profiles, which is good, but they're very weak profiles and they have very few connections. And that's not necessarily, I mean, it makes sense because you don't necessarily know a lot of people in the business when you're a student. There's a few things. First off, build out your profile. Fill out everything. That can really help you. Fill out the skills section so you're showing up in recruiter searches. If you can take a LinkedIn Learning course and add the LinkedIn Learning course to your certificate, that increases your chances of getting in recruiter searches by 10%. So that's a big advantage. Some of your biggest advocates can be your professors. And I really also recommend, we've seen strength is quite frankly, reaching out to alumni and connecting to people at the type of jobs that you want to work in. So if you're an engineer and you want to work at Pratt & Whitney, it makes a lot of sense to reach out to those, exactly, Jacquelynn, et cetera, to reach out to people like that and build your network that way. So the good news is, as a student, because most students, quite frankly, have weak profiles, that if you build a strong profile, you really, really stand out. So, and one last thing I'll add is if you can get recommendations, especially from your professors or maybe somebody you did an internship with and on your LinkedIn profile, that can really make your profile stand out.
Thanks, Paul. And for those that are unaware as well, there is a platform that LinkedIn has where if you just type in University of Connecticut into the search profile at the top of the LinkedIn homepage, it actually gives you, when you click on the university's homepage or landing page via LinkedIn, there's actually a section there that says Find Alumni on the bottom left side. If you click that, you're actually gaining access to every alumni or current student that actually is connected to the university in their within their profile. So again, when talking about exponential value to your network, you need to remember that there's over 255,000 living alumni. Then you're talking about the 2,600 connections that Jackie has, the 1,500 connections that Morgan, Paul, and Khalil have. And everybody has those open doors that they can bring you into to help grow your network, make those connections, and foster those results. Morgan, I know that's how you and I met. Obviously, I did some outreach a number of years ago to a colleague of yours where the fellow UConn alum was working at Lee Hecht Harrison, where Morgan used to work, reached out to that person, and she said, I work with an alum. And 7 years later, Morgan and I are still staying in touch and working together. And so I know you have a lot of experience in that as well.
Absolutely. And just to make a slight factual correction, I have over 4,200 connections, Josh, and I know Jackie's very competitive. So I just want to make sure I got that out there. And
I've already got 10.
Thanks to Melanie Flowers, I now have 4,214. So thanks, Melanie, for connecting.
All right. So we did get our poll results, and it looks like we had some, and apologies, I closed it out. Kate, would you mind throwing that back up if you're able to for me? And we'll read those out so people can kind of have an understanding of where folks stand. All right, we're looking at 31% within the 0 to 200, 22% 200 to 500, 22% 500 to 1,000, and 18% have 1,000 plus, and 6% even said that they don't have LinkedIn. So I think one of our messages is in today's day and age, but within the COVID world, LinkedIn is a very good access or use to help build your network at this point. So we apologize if we're heavy on LinkedIn, but in today's day and age and of connecting broadly across the globe, it's definitely one of those things that we felt was necessary to kind of bring together. All right, so we talked about the 1,000 plus. Here's the question, right? We've talked about maintaining and cultivating that network. Morgan, you got 4,000 and change, Jackie, 2,600. How do we, Khalil, Paul, anybody want to take this one? How do we stay in touch? How do we cultivate these people? And how do we make sure that it's ready for us when we need it?
Well, you take it, Clay.
Sure. I'm actually taking notes over here myself. So you should never stop learning is one thing that I want to get out there first and foremost. I'm admittedly somewhat of, I guess some could consider me somewhat of a laggard when it comes to engaging fully in LinkedIn in the ways that we've discussed here. It took a while for me to see the return on investment, and it's largely because I didn't take the time to put the work in and cultivate that brand, so to speak. I'm a social worker. I'm a community organizer. I strongly believe that a sign of a just society is how it uses its greatest resources to improve the lives of underserved communities and so on and so forth. And I think technology is a way to do that. So I was able to kind of, through my LinkedIn, develop that narrative that fits, with my career path. And then again, kind of harken back to what I said earlier, is that, folks are able to read my LinkedIn and get a snapshot of what I'm about, where my strengths lie, what my interests are, and where I want to be in the future. It kind of gets ahead of that. Where do you want to be in 5 years question? But I will say 1 to 2 articles per week. That is impressive. I do not reach that. I wish I had more time, and I think I might actually bake that in. Maybe on a Saturday morning, I might as well just move that into my Saturday morning coffee routine, just to post a couple articles that I think are interesting and might be interesting to my community. Because at the end of the day, as a social worker, as a UConn grad, as a nutmegger, and as someone who's moved out to the West Coast, I might not have 10,000 LinkedIn connections, but I do have a diverse group of connections. I have, I think it's close to 800 LinkedIn connections with folks from all walks of life. Folks that are in direct services related to social work, all the way up to technologists and engineers and things like that. So what I try to do is engage with other folks' content. I try to keep my profile up to date. I put different accomplishments in there that are obviously externally or able to be externalized, so that people can kind of stay lockstep with me as my career develops. And I think it's important to curate the content, but it's also important to update it. And that's something that I think is pretty hard for folks, and that you just get caught up in your day-to-day thing. And next thing you know, you realize 5 years later, like, oh man, my LinkedIn is like out of date. So just keeping that in mind, that you really need to curate it and maintain it over time. So I'll pass it on to Paul if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Khalil. I think that's such an important part, is to tell your story on LinkedIn and what you're looking to do in your career, which a lot of people are like you, Khalil, but even worse. I mean, they very rarely update their LinkedIn. The vast majority of LinkedIn profiles, quite frankly, are weak. So if you tell a strong story, like Jacquelynn said, every single hiring manager, every single recruiter is going to look at your LinkedIn before you come in for the interview. I know I do, even before I work for LinkedIn. So if you can tell a story that's going to resonate, you're going to stand out so much farther than the other candidates. As far as building your network and staying engaged, you don't have to do it twice a week is awesome. You definitely don't have to do it that much, but the key is you don't have to always be creating new content. It's just can be a matter of liking, commenting, things like that. I'll give if you're really interested, if you're doing business development or marketing and you really want to grow your network and see LinkedIn as a great way to get intros, then obviously you have to be more aggressive. Not aggressive is the wrong word, but more active and post more often. But if that's not your job, if you're a social worker, for example, it's much more important just to have just a profile that tells your story and connections to the type of people that you want to connect with, not just this broad-based connecting to everybody.
Thank you for that, Paul. And I know we talked a little bit on the, probably heavily on the social media aspect of this, but obviously in a virtual age that we're living in today, one of the questions that's come in from one of our participants today, I think is very relevant and valid for right now. Because of the digital age, is there a matter of presence? Is there something that you would recommend in terms of best ways to maintain these connections, hopping on the phone, emails, Zoom calls? How do you navigate this in the environment that we're in today? And how is it help your network? Is there any benefit to doing it one way or another?
I think when we all, started to venture into this new normal of being out of office spaces and university, right, and just being quarantined at home, people gravitated towards the use of video calls and having more time to just check in with people, which is really important. Of course, we were all, faced with great adversity. And so I think for me, being in corporate America in a big tech company, we are using video a lot for our meetings because we can't see one another in the office or in the lab. And especially with people that are engineers and very introverted, right? Like this is not their jam. But I think we all need to get comfortable with it, right? Because this is what's happening. And so when, for example, I've had people reach out to me recently coming off of a community event, and they're like, hey, let's connect. And I said, well, I'm happy to go meet you outdoors somewhere in Hartford, right? Just to get outside, or happy to jump on a video chat, because everyone's life situation is different, right? You might have to homeschool, child's care, work full time. Like life is just in our faces all the time. So whatever is most comfortable for you, certainly. But what I can appreciate is over the last 3 months, especially with your work life, having people look all dolled up like I do today on a call, and then you just show up the next day and you're just like a complete mess. And so that's becoming normalized, which I can appreciate, right? Because it's just like you show up, authenticity, right? Like obviously you don't want to look like a bum, but people are just realizing that we're blending work and life all together. So, but being a responsible professional and knowing that you're going to be on camera, this, for example, will be recorded, so we all look, our best, but just being real with people and meeting them where they're at, right? Because people have very different communication styles and will be comfortable with, particular media. So just seeing what works best to really foster and nurture those relationships is my advice.
All right, thank you, Jackie. And this all kind of steers us in the right direction of what we were hoping to do with our conversation. And obviously, Khalil, I'm going to turn to you at this point. I'm sure personal connections and social channels are nothing new for you at this point, but from your perspective as our Facebook expert, how many friends do you say you have on Facebook at this point?
Oh, I will say, I'm sure there are people on this call that have more friends than I do. But, I've been on Facebook for, I guess, a decade now. I was on Facebook initially when it was just for college students, if folks remember those times, yes. Dark ages. But yeah, so here we are now, and it's grown obviously exponentially. The scale of it is really staggering, and it's obviously got Instagram and other really popular apps that people really enjoy and engage with regularly. But I think I have 2,000 Facebook friends currently, maybe a little over 2,000. And I will say, and Jacquelynn kind of alluded to this earlier, that I do believe in there being kind of my professional persona, which is often kind of articulated and honed on my LinkedIn profile, whereas my Facebook profile is usually where I go to keep up with friends, family, and also, professional connections that often become friends and often become close as family. So, it helps me keep up with all the birthdays of my nieces and nephews. It helps me keep my social events in order. There's a ton of things that I think people are really actually right now given the circumstances we're in, are kind of revisiting Facebook and seeing all the tools and resources that it does offer communities and the ability to stay connected. So with that said, I don't necessarily use my Facebook in the same way that I would use my LinkedIn. And to harken back to the question you just asked, you know, I think one thing that I do regularly is reach out to folks that are in my network that are posting, and I'm finding their work interesting. It doesn't necessarily have to be in tech. It doesn't necessarily have to be related to social work. It could be just someone who graduated, you know, a couple years after me at UConn, is really doing interesting work in X, Y, and Z, and say, hey, you know, I'm fascinated and really just impressed by the work that you've been able to do. You know, I just wanted to just kind of tip my hat and say, you know, keep on keeping on. Just to kind of like say, hey, you know, we see you, we see the work that you're doing, you're making an impact, and it's really important. So I think that matters and goes a long way, because at the end of the day, that's what a lot of folks, you know, are looking for when they post these things, because they want to start a conversation. And normally I'll even lead in with some questions about it. Can you tell me more about this or more about that? And that shows that kind of inner and an innate curiosity that I think is really kind of propelled my career into, you know, the work that I'm doing now. So I hope that answers your question. And I'd say on Twitter, as a community organizer, you know, I find Twitter and Facebook to be very valuable resources, and I'm sure LinkedIn could be used as in the same ways. But it largely depends on, you know, your comfort level. Again, like what are you posting? What kind of social issues are you addressing? Are you comfortable posting those on LinkedIn? Because obviously, if you do that, that's going to bleed into your professional development as well. That said, I tried to keep some lines between the two, but I will say I don't feel, you know, I want to make sure that if a LinkedIn connection were to go on my Twitter or to go on my Facebook page, they wouldn't see some complete stark contrast, like who is this person that is on my LinkedIn, right? There has to be some continuity there. And I think my ethos, my values are kind of transferred across all of those platforms in varying degrees. So I think that's an important thing to think through, because you really, it might creep people out if you're like saying something on LinkedIn and then saying the exact opposite on Twitter. So I'll stop at that and see if anybody else has anything they want to add.
Thank you for that, Khalil. And while everybody else takes a moment to think about that, and we'll chime in a second, I'm going to ask Kate to throw up one more poll on the page today to kind of get an understanding of who uses what social media platform. But just back to the panel, if anybody have additional thoughts, do you draw a line in the sand and use the platforms differently, or do you use them very similarly?
I use each. So I have LinkedIn, that's my professional self. That's where I'm posting content that's mostly related to being a woman in tech, amplifying and elevating other people's work based on their professional selves or their community. I'm also on Twitter, and I found like there's a lot of garbage on Twitter, of course, but you just need to find your people, right? And so I follow a lot of technologists, women in tech, astronomy, like I'm just like all over the place. But once you find a good community of people to just follow, I think it just brings a different level. So my Twitter is mostly used for you know, promoting my company organizations and my community service, and as well just like following some really inspirational people. And then Facebook, like Khalil said, is mostly for keeping up with family, friends, community, you know, programs, what's really happening, knowing when people's birthdays are, because that's really important and helps. But for me, I create different copy. It might be a similar themed post. There are apps like Hootsuite and others that will just post the same thing on every platform that you belong to. But for me, my brand, what I like to do is to create different copy, because I recognize that each one of those platforms has a different voice. It's still your authentic voice, your authentic self, but they just lend themselves differently. And if you follow certain, you know, organizations, whether it be your company or, you know, a community like a for-profit or a nonprofit that you're invested in, or even just large corporations, like you could see how there's different, you know, ways in which they're promoting. So I use that term, every platform has its own voice, and you could see that, the more that you tune into that. And especially some of the trolling that happens across large companies like, Wendy's versus Burger King or Ben and Jerry's, like they'll just there's some really fun stuff that happens on Twitter that won't happen. You won't see that on other platforms. And I also use Instagram because I'm a foodie and I love just prepping meals and just doing that. So I've compartmentalized my life, but it's my whole self, but they all serve a different purpose for me.
Thank you, Jackie. And while the rest of our panel thinks about this, we'll have our poll thrown up. Looks like 15% are using Facebook, 78% use LinkedIn as the primary, 3% Twitter, and 5% other. And Jackie, you mentioned this, and it kind of leads us into our next discussion piece. And I'll throw out a quick 12-minute warning to everyone, just so they kind of know where we are on the clock. And this is a great time, folks, if you are interested in asking any questions of our panelists. We do have a little bit more that we're going to cover, but now's a good time to throw that into the Q&A, and we'll get to those as they kind of come through. But I want to direct this next question to Morgan. Morgan, Jackie talked a little bit about personal brand, being our career expert. What can you tell us about personal brand? What is it? Why is it important? And do we need to have it?
Sure, it's critically important. And the term means different things in different circumstances. So, there are only a couple of Elon Musks and Oprah Winfrey's, and they certainly have their own personal brands. For me, in the career and networking perspective, I would like to say that my personal brand is, what do I want people to say about me when I'm not around? What do I want them to say when someone asks, Morgan? So for me, what I want them to say is, hey, he's awesome. He knows everybody. He's a great listener. What a thoughtful person. He's willing to help. And he always offers more than I expected. And that's really been my philosophy, because in business development and in consulting, it's all about relationships. And my favorite quote is from Maya Angelou. It's at the end of the day, people won't remember what you said or did. They will remember how you made them feel. And to me, that is the most interesting and important aspect of networking, especially in person. So I used to, go into an in-person networking event, and my goal was to get as many business cards as I could. And over the years, I've changed my philosophy. And really, if it's an hour and a half or 2-hour networking event, I want to come away with 4 or 5 people that I've had a meaningful conversation with. And I'll collect as many business cards as I can, don't get me wrong, but I want to be able to follow up with those key people that I've talked to, and in the follow-up reference something that they discussed in our conversation. So to me, it's about a depth of connection rather than just another person necessarily on my list. And leveraging your network for career gains is incredibly important. And I want to be able to feel valued and respected when someone approaches me. So I want them to be reverent, but not go overboard. Not really kiss up to me. I don't like that. I don't think a lot of other people do. When I'm reaching out to somebody, I want to create the feeling that we're on the same level. So even if I'm reaching out to a CEO of an organization that I'm trying to sell to, I will be reverent again, but not overly impressed. You know what I mean? And got a little yard work going on out here and some dogs barking, so I'm going to pause for now.
I'd like to jump on what Morgan was saying about business cards. I personally don't have a business card. I've changed titles like 3 times, with a lot of the changes that have been happening within my professional career with mergers and acquisitions. So I'm going out to career fairs. I'm going and meeting with students. I'm in community events, and people are like, oh, do you have a business card? I'm like, no, but here's my LinkedIn code, right? So on LinkedIn, when you go to your search bar, there's like that little QR code. You could either scan someone's code or pull up your own. Absolutely do that, because it, one, just like takes care of it there. But also, if you're a young professional like me or someone that's a student, you don't have your own business card. So it'll just be a quicker turn to be able to continue to build your network. And so I think being savvy with that, it took me a while to understand, well, what is this code? How do I do this? But that's in lieu of having a business card or like writing out a whole email address, right? Like QR codes are what's up.
Actually, I'll add to that. We have a new feature now called Find Nearby. You have to Google exactly how to use it. But basically, if you click on it and the person's next to you clicks on it, within your LinkedIn app, it'll automatically pull up the other person. You can immediately connect. It's a little bit more seamless than the QR. We do it at events, and you can have everybody at the event connect with. So Google Find Nearby at LinkedIn if you want to use that feature for that.
Awesome. You're hearing it here first. Wow. All right. All right. So one other question and tied to this area as well. And Morgan, you kind of alluded to this when you're reaching out to CEOs of a company and the like. Can you talk a little bit about the term informational interviews and whether or not that's applicable not only to just students, but say somebody that's 10 or 15 years out in the industry?
Yeah, for me, the most effective way to use LinkedIn for job search is to find a connection who works at the company that you're interested in and set up a conversation. The bottom line for job postings online is this: more jobs are filled before they ever get posted than are posted. And many times when a job is posted, it's because it's a legal requirement. Often there's an internal candidate that has all but been selected and started in the job before you see it online. So the idea about informational interviews is identify the company you want to work for, and then find somebody that knows someone who's in a position that you're interested in, and set up a conversation in a casual way that says, I want to learn about what you do and what it's like to work at XYZ company. And in the conversation, make sure that you are inviting and making it possible for that individual to talk about themselves. You know, there's nothing more that most people want to talk about than themselves. And that can be incredibly helpful, because if you let people talk, they will reveal more than you expect. So some other tips: people may not want to recommend you or introduce you to someone who's a vital connection for them after the first date, so to speak. So you may not want to go in for the close right away. You may want to have a goal for your first interaction with this person is ask them to recommend some things you can read or some research you can do to learn about that career, about the company, or about the role you're interested in. And then see if it's okay if you set up a follow-up conversation. And if you ask insightful questions about the career path, about the company, about what they do, you know, that'll show that you're interested, and they may be willing to recommend you speak to someone before you even have to ask. So to me, it's about relationship building. And the most important aspect to networking is offering to help the other person as well. It has to be reciprocal. Mm-hmm. And again, it's about how did you make somebody feel? So the perfunctory way to do it is there anything I can do for you, Josh? A better way to phrase that is, what can I do for you? And that creates something different in their mind. They're actually thinking of things that they need done. And to me, the best one is to reference something they discussed and say, you know, perhaps you mentioned you're having trouble recruiting software engineers. How do you think I could help you with that? Or if I could do X, Y, Z for you, would that be helpful? You have to personalize this type of interaction so that it feels much more meaningful and authentic, as Jackie's discussed, because that's what's going to lead to success for you. You know, if I didn't know Paul and I said, I want to be a business developer for LinkedIn, who can you introduce me to? He's not even going to respond, right? More than likely.
Homework.
Exactly. So it's all about having the right mindset, not, you know, necessarily going too far on the first date, and, you know, setting yourself up as a professional and showing genuine interest and being willing to work for, you know, that introduction for someone that they may think is really valuable. Because look, I don't want to introduce somebody that is a valuable connection for me to an individual that I don't know very well. I'm not going to do that. I've been embarrassed before, and I won't make that mistake again.
Thank you, Morgan. I think that's a crucial thing to know. One of the, given timing, and folks, we are probably going to run a few minutes over here. So just if you I do need to jump off, as we mentioned, it will be recorded. We will be able to share this with you, but kind of moving us towards the conclusion here today. One of the things that obviously is crucial to having a network is then, painstakingly building it, trying to get our careers enhanced into the next level. How do we now use it, and how do we leverage it? I mean, I'm guessing, Morgan, it's not just calling you up and saying, hey, Morgan, I need a job. Do you know somebody? That's not how it works anymore. It's how do we utilize it, and how does it kind of work? We all just didn't call a company and said, I want a job, and we got hired, right? That's not how it works at LinkedIn and Facebook, right? I mean, you guys don't just call them and say, hey, I'm looking for a job.
Well, yeah,
Exactly.
and actually, the current role I'm in was a direct result of networking. Somebody I had worked with for a total of 6 months and was connected with on LinkedIn, who I'm not sure I ever even met in person. So I worked with this person for 6 months in 2010. She was leaving her role, and her boss asked her to recommend somebody. She called a friend of mine that was a colleague in Houston. She said, why don't you call Morgan? This woman called me. I had a conversation with my boss, and he hired me like 3 days later. So it's making connections and being meaningful, and offering value. And again, being visible. You're visible just by liking something. It doesn't take any time. Just click.
Khalil, what about you? I mean, obviously, a kid from Connecticut, social work degree, worked for congressional leadership. One day, you just said, "I'm going to go work for Facebook," and just applied online, and that's all.
Yeah, I wish it were that simple. There was a lot of plain sweat and tears, blood, sweat, and tears, as they say, that went into that. But that's a great question, and it took time. And I think a lot of the things that we've discussed today, I've been able to kind of work into my approach. But it all starts again with knowing your worth, really, and knowing what value you bring to the role. And I said it at the outset, I think it's really important that you spend some time to think about that. And I know it sounds high level and esoteric, but really, like, what are your interests? What are your values? And what do you want to impart to folks that you either want to connect with or are already connected with? And driving that point home, because narrative really matters in today's hiring world. And at the end of the day, if you can develop a succinct narrative, you're really making the recruiter's job pretty easy, and that's one thing that you want to do. You want to be able to say, or them to say, that we have to hire this person. They're the obvious fit for the role. And one thing that I'm kind of from a tangible standpoint, one thing that I've done over the years, and I started this when I was in senior at UConn, was developing a CV. So basically a long form version of my resume that captures all of my accomplishments for over a decade, in all walks of life. So that I can kind of use it as my grab bag that I refer to when I'm applying to different roles to say, okay, this fits with the job description here. And I'll have a resume that I'll pick from my CV to kind of tailor it to each specific role so that it's relevant. I'll make sure that the buzzwords and jargon that are used in the job description are reflected in my cover letter, are reflected in my resume, so that, again, you're making the job of the recruiter very easy. They're able to say, hey, this person embodies the kind of person that we want in this role. So I think those are some tangible things that you can do. But from my personal perspective, I worked as a social worker, which is predominantly, at least from society standpoint, people see it mostly as a direct services and micro kind of job, which is incredibly important in my view to society. But I think social workers have incredible range as professionals, and I think the fact that we're based in empathy is hugely important to the policy development process, and we should have a seat at the table to represent underrepresented communities, which is again, a part of my narrative and a part of my belief system. And I think that comes across when you meet me and we engage on any topic, whether it be social or otherwise. You're going to realize pretty quickly where I stand on these issues and how I think social work really has a role to play. So to give you a quick snapshot of how I ended up at Facebook, I worked in Senator Blumenthal's office, where I was able to kind of cultivate this social work policy macro level approach. I decided, it was time to try something else. I had grown into the role in the Senate, and I was ready to try something else, a new challenge. So what did I do? I started engaging on LinkedIn, and really sussing out from my policy achievements in the Senate where the nexus between tech was connected, to make that stuff tangible. And then I started the coffees, and then I started the dinners, and then I started, branching out. And next thing you know, I actually got a job initially when I moved to California in a GovTech company. So similar to like a Code for America, basically a tech company, a civic tech company that provides or applies tech in social safety net programs, which was perfectly aligned with what my interests were and what my skill sets were. I grew up in a lot of safety net programs, growing up in Hartford, Connecticut, and obviously I worked on a lot of them in social work. So I got that job initially, and I had also laid the groundwork for a lot of networking that led to my kind of, culminating, trip out to California, where I've been for 2 years now. And one interesting anecdote is that I had a conversation with a Instagram staffer that I work with now, after I got the job at the GovTech company. And I'd be honest, it was a Friday at 7 o'clock. It was awfully late. I was not really in the right mindset. I was tired. It had been a long week. I didn't want to do it, but I did it anyways. And we had a great 30-minute conversation where I was able to get my persona and my personal brand across. And at the time, I didn't know anything would come of it. But a year later, a recruiter from Facebook reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in talking to us about this content policy role?" So I had to actually do some homework to excavate how the heck this person actually found me. But that's how it works. That extra bit of effort and having that narrative so easily, construed by folks that don't really know me from a hole in the wall is so important to kind of getting a leg up and separating myself from the folks that, went to the Ivy League schools and have been working in tech internships since, they could walk. So it was really important for me to set myself apart from those folks. And that's one way that I did it. And I got a little lucky too, because I had that extra conversation when I didn't feel like having it. So I know that was a bit long-winded, but I hope that was helpful to folks.
That's great. And I think Jackie is kind of doing some of this on the back end right now with the chat pieces, talking about continuing to manage that network as well. And I think you talked about opening doors and building your network to get to where you need to be, right? And not shying away from those conversations, even at those times where you're like, you know what, I just want to turn into the day. A beer would be great right now. Time to it's been a long week. But turns out having impacted and changed your life in a certain way. So I think that
absolutely.
One of the things that we talk about in Alumni when we have our events throughout the country is we talk about all these opportunities to connect with other Huskies. People don't realize sitting at a bar watching a game, by the way, 6 more days and we're back in the Big East. Everybody excited, right? It's those type of conversations that can lead to something else, right? We talked about it, 255,000 living alums. You don't know who knows who and what they're connected to. So I think to your point, Khalil, have those conversations, be open to them. And Jackie's on the back end on the chats right now, telling folks about making sure you're staying in contact with people, checking in with them. You've mentioned it a few times as well, Khalil, where in the environment that we're in today, there's no greater or more important thing to do right now than to just stay in touch with your network and check in with them, make sure they're doing all right. It's hard right now. Some states are in the midst of opening. Some have opened and are shutting back down. We had this conversation last week when we all got together. And Morgan, you're in Texas right now. Texas is in a state of flux right now. The governor's urging folks to stay at home again. So it's kind of a lot of uncertainty right now in the world. And I think that given the environment we're in, you have an ability to do that check-in and send those notes and cultivate and leverage what you've been spending time building. For those that are in the process of building it now, you have 5 more people to add to your connection pool right now if you just jump on LinkedIn. I'm thinking everybody's looking at the, find the nearby app portion that Paul talked about. If only we all could pull up our QR codes like Jackie, hold them up on the screen. Y'all could just take pictures right now and kind of go from there. But I've noticed on my phone as well, and y'all have mentioned it as well, that you've been getting quite a few connections as we've been sitting here. So as we are now past the 1 o'clock mark, I'm going to just throw one last question to the panel here, given the amount of time that we have left. And Paul, if you don't mind starting us here, what would you say would be the last piece of advice that you would give to folks as the most important aspect to remember from today's discussion, and the experiences and tips that you would offer?
I know this isn't directly related to what we were saying, but Khalil's story just resonated with me so much. I felt very similar where, I was working as a reporter in a small town in Connecticut and making not a lot of money and working a lot of hours. And I wasn't really doing it with this idea of, this is going to lead to some great job in LinkedIn or some tech job. I did it because I really cared. I loved writing, and that was what I wanted to do. And that's what I focused on. And because I focused on that and built that, I built my network over time, and I got, wound up now have a much better job than I did, at least from a prestige perspective. But it certainly wasn't, I wasn't thinking that when I was a small town reporter in Connecticut. I just liked the job. So I know wherever you're doing right now, it may not be exactly what you thought, or it may not be the pay you want or the prestige you want, but keep building your network. And most importantly, just try to figure out what you really like and what you really love to do. And that you may not see it now, but it will lead to the things that you'd be unexpected where it might take you.
Thanks, Paul. Morgan, do you want to jump in next?
To me, my biggest nugget is to try to do more than you ask for. Try to be a servant and offer to give at least as much as you want to receive.
Thanks, Morgan. Jackie?
In our pre-conversation, we had thrown around the term of social capital, I think, and we didn't bring it up today, but in all of the stories and examples that you've heard from us on the panel, it's absolutely critical, because you are one unique person and you need to stand out from everyone else, right? Because especially being a young professional or a student, everyone's resume basically would look the same. How do you differentiate yourself? And you use social media to serve that purpose. And so I am really excited about learning myself throughout this power hour of being here with all of you. So I definitely appreciate it and look forward to staying connected with all my new Husky friends.
Thanks, Jackie. All right, Khalil, take us home.
Yeah, sure. I just want to plus one to everything all of these brilliant fellow panelists have said. I'm really just blown away continuously by our UConn family. But I guess I'll just keep it simple. Just know your worth. Don't be afraid to put the energy and effort into this. It really does go a long way. As Paul said, if you asked me 10 years ago if I would be working at Facebook and engaging on these issues across the world, I probably would have laughed at you or thought you were crazy or walked away immediately. And my goals and my interests and my passion have driven me. And I think that is infectious to recruiters and to coworkers and to colleagues. It helps. And you want to be that person that people want to work with because they feel excited and inspired by you. And I imagine you all kind of possess those same capabilities and skills. So just really dig deep and pull those out, and don't be afraid to kind of be vulnerable or slightly uncomfortable. Because I'll be honest, I kind of alluded to it earlier. I was uncomfortable, sharing all of these views on LinkedIn, thinking, oh man, this seems, a little odd, because I'm quite personal. I'm a very private person. So at the end of the day, just getting over that was really the first step in me kind of developing that brand that stood the test of time. And who knows, I might reinvent myself and find another way to apply my skills down the road. But right now I'm growing in this role at a company that's obviously growing in size every day, and has the ability to really impact people for the better. So I'm happy where I'm at, content where I'm at, and I think as long as you find a job you enjoy, it makes things a lot easier for you and your family and all of those around you. So good luck with everything, and I look forward to answering, or we look forward to answering any questions that you all might have.
Thanks, Khalil. Before we wrap today, just want to make a quick announcement as well. The next, and apologies, thunderstorm rolling through here in Connecticut. So if you're hearing some crashing, it's coming down pretty hard right here where I am today. The next Elevate Career Hacks is working in collaboration with the UConn Foundation's Women in Philanthropy organization to bring you a panel on female leadership in terms of the pandemic. We have some great panelists, including the Chief Investment Officer of Royal Caribbean International. We also have the Director of Emergency Medical at UConn Health, among others, who will be joining us for a panel. The details of that are still being finalized, and we hope to have a webpage for all of you that we can send in a follow-up shortly. But that'll be coordinated for July 14th, around the same time that you participated today. So keep an eye out for that. Additionally, I want to make sure that everyone is aware the university and the foundation do provide some career resources for you. So as you are in the midst of a job search or looking to make further connections, there are numerous opportunities for you to do that. The university itself does provide, within 3 years of your graduation date, all of the same resources and services that you had as a student. So for those that are in the workforce already, you do still have the ability to contact the Career Services Office or the Career Development Office for a 1-hour free consultation if you'd like to do that. That can include an overview of the resources and things available through their website, which, by the way, is career.uconn.edu. You can also access the Husky Mentor Network, which is a group of individuals who have self-selected and identified to be there for mentorship, resources, connectivity, whatever it is that you might need. And that's available to alums and to students to participate in. All of those are accessible, again, through the career website that I mentioned, career.uconn.edu. And that's singular, not plural, career. We also, as the foundation, we do realize that many of you may be already beyond the 3 years of graduation point. So we provide a supplemental service as well through a career and management consulting practice called Pro-Tem Partners. They provide a free 90-minute consult that can also include resume review and a redirect of thought process and whatever you might need to help you get your feet on the ground to start doing your job search. If you have any interest in that service, please contact me directly. All of you should have numerous emails from me at this point, so feel free to just reply to one of those. And again, the resources via the career office, again, with the job board, the Husky Mentor Network, as well as other services that are available is career.uconn.edu. We have another set of events coming to you as well, so keep an eye out on the UConn Foundation's, UConn Alumni's Husky Hub. You can find that by going to foundation.uconn.edu/husky-hub, and you can get all the resources that are available to you now. Obviously, in this virtual world that we're living in, we're trying to make sure everything's accessible to you online. Seeing no other questions come through during this time period, I want to give a huge thanks to all of our all-star panelists, to Jackie, to Paul, to Morgan, to Khalil. Thank you all for joining us today. Incredible information, really great getting to know you all as well in this process. And to my great colleagues in the background, making sure everything went smoothly and everybody had a voice that wanted to share something today, was able to do that. To Kate Krause and Alyssa Kelly, thank you both so much. And to all of you, we hope your families are well and safe and healthy during all this. We hope to see you at an in-person event soon, and make sure you find us on LinkedIn. All right, take care, everybody. Again, panelists, thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of your days.
Thank you.
Go Huskies.
Take care, everyone.